Hello, my friends. Let's talk about something that's kind of fallen out of the news that you probably haven't heard about in a while, but it's actually happening right now, potentially as this video is being played to you. That's airstrikes in Syria by Israel. Now, Syria has been in a basically decades-long civil war, and there's been so much upheaval in that country. But at the end of the day, Israel's been playing a game of whack-a-mole in that region to try to keep certain threats down and keep those threats from becoming a factor to Israel. So in this situation, as if Israel sees a good offense as even better than a good defense, to keep some of these factions from becoming factors that could recreate another crazy tragic event like what happened in October 7th of 2023 when the state of Israel was attacked and they suffered hundreds, if not thousands of losses due to drones and rebel attacks. But it's essentially like a never-ending chess game in the skies of the Middle East when it comes to Israel, Iran, Syria. There's so many shifting nations and factions, not to mention factions like Hezbollah and Hamas, these terrorist organizations that are essentially wreaking havoc in the area, and they're actually meddling in Syria as well, vying for power in that strategic 3D to 4D game of chess that's taking place right now. And no, this isn't like an all-out declaration of war by Israel and Syria. It's more of this like high-stakes dance that's happening to try to make sure some of these factions like Hezbollah and Hamas don't receive large chunks of territory or a massive amount of power that can challenge Israel even more than it already is. So what's Israel using to perform these airstrikes? We'll get into some of the specific airstrikes here in a second, but the jets that are being used are the F-16I, which is a two-seat version of the F-16. There are some single-seat versions as well, but it's definitely a highly modified F-16 that has external fuel tanks, can fly a lot further distances than a traditional F-16, and doesn't need to be refueled because of those external fuel tanks. Next, Israel has the F-15I, which can primarily be an air-to-air fighter for their single-seat variants, but then in their dual-seat variants, they've essentially got a powerhouse like an F-15E, dubbed the F-15I, that can go out there, wreak havoc, deep strike, interdiction. On a personal note, flying the F-15E for me in combat, I wouldn't want to fly any other plane in combat than the F-15E or the F-15EX, even the F-35 or F-22, just because of the massive amount of gas and massive amount of armament that the F-15E carries, and the fact that you've got two pilots in there. For me, up front, flying in Afghanistan, raging around those massive mountains, 20,000 plus mountains, it felt great knowing that I could focus outside and let the guy or gal in the back run the radar, help run the pod, because at a certain point, the pod is basically this massive camera where you can see a lot. I can't say the exact number, but you can see many miles in front of you with extremely high fidelity, and you can get lost in that. It's like looking through a soda straw. So the fact that I had someone in the back there making moves, making things happen, just made me feel a little more at ease flying around those 20,000 plus mountains. And it made me more able to treat those mountains like pylons as I executed some pretty fun turns around them. Israel's also got the Apache factor. They also fly US-made Apaches, and they wreak havoc on these rebel groups in Syria if they need to. These things can fly really close to the front of the lines of battle where, let's say, a rebel group is doing something that Israel is not too happy about. Hey, rebel group, stop that. And they're going to say stop that with an Apache. And these things pack some serious firepower and gunpower. Literally, there is a gun that is attached to the front aviator's helmet and allows them to look and then just squeeze the trigger wherever they're looking, their sights right over whatever they need to shoot. These things wreak some serious havoc on the enemy. And if you don't know, there's a lot of examples in Afghanistan of this thing providing extremely accurate close air support. There's a book called Cleared Hot by my friend Lieutenant Colonel Brian Slade, which details his experiences in the Apache in Afghanistan. But Israel's essentially using that same technique in Syria. As they need to, they roll in the Apaches and take care of business. One of the biggest weapons that Israel's also using in Syria are PGMs, precision-guided munitions. And these are weapons that can be dropped from the different fighter jets that Israel flies, and they can tune in right down to the meter or maybe the foot even. Some of these are small diameter bombs, so they're going to have low collateral damage, but there's also 2,000 pounders and 500 pounders that are being dropped as well. And then we'll talk about Israel's missile defense system. So as they fly these fighter jet sorties into Syria, they want to protect the jets after they land. So they've got what's called an Iron Dome or David Sling, which protects these fighter jet bases that are hidden, that are secret, and keeps rockets from being able to come in and destroy Israel's arsenal of fighter aircraft, their arsenal of Apaches. They're all protected under that Iron Dome, which is just a huge form of resilience for Israel to not lose any of these impressive aircraft. And Israel, if you haven't already guessed it, they operate with a massive amount of operational secrecy. It's essentially like their fighter pilots or special forces operators can't show their face. You'll never really see a detailed interview with an Israeli fighter pilot because they're so specially trained that having their identity out there could risk, losing one of these fighter pilots, which are extremely valuable. And in the US, obviously, I'm talking to you on YouTube, former fighter pilots, we're not trying to necessarily protect our identity, but Israel has a special situation where they're so close to the front lines of the battle, they really can't risk losing a fighter pilot at all. But Israel's airstrikes in Syria have become a critical part of their defense strategy, like I mentioned before. They understand that if they allow some of these groups to fester and embolden themselves in Syria, then they're just going to be facing them even closer to their front doorstep. Let's kind of step through some of the phases that Israel has gone through and where these airstrikes are at today. In January of 2013, Israel kind of really stepped up their airstrikes, and that culminated with destroying an entire convoy that was transporting Iranian arms into Syria to give to some of the rebel groups. Israel basically said, hey, Iran, stop that. We're not going to allow you to transport these weapons to groups that could potentially be dangerous for Israel. And then subsequent operations have carried out since 2013 all the way through about 2015, where Israel is really just focused on weapons caches, transporting weapons from Iran into Syria, getting that supply lane shut down. But now they've kind of ramped up airstrikes. And that ramp up happened in January of 2015 in an area of the Golan Heights that was controlled by Syria, where they just started importing a whole bunch of weapons that could be used against Israel. Israel dropped weapons in the Golan Heights, destroying this and eliminating dozens of insurgents in the process. And this just enhanced the dispute over the Golan Heights region, and since that strike in 2015, 2017, 2018, drops in the region have increased, especially targeting weapons caches and supply lines that are bringing in even more weapons. And then in 2017, 2018, those strikes just increased, and it was a not-so-secret game of whack-a-mole, as Israel, instead of using a mallet to strike down the moles, they were using F-16s. And then in 2018, Israel executed what was called Operation House of Cards, and that's when over 20 fighter aircraft were deployed. And those aircraft were flying multiple missions per day into Syria, and the escalation just continued from there. Their primary focus of that Operation House of Cards was to eliminate Hezbollah's operations in Syria. But a secondary objective, if they're flying into Syria, was to eliminate the Syrian air defenses, which might keep them from targeting Hezbollah. So are they targeting Syria? I mean, not technically, but they're essentially like, hey, Syria, if you keep us from going in and targeting Hezbollah, you're going to go bye-bye. And then from 2019 to 2022, Israel just really stepped up their attacks on Hezbollah, kind of like the US stepped up their attacks on ISIS. Syria was basically getting hit every day by Israeli forces that were going in and targeting Hezbollah. So it's essentially like Israel said, hey, we gave you heads up before Syria that we were going in, but the fact that you're not doing anything to eliminate Hezbollah, and actually they're being supported by Iran even more, it just means that we're not going to give you the heads up anymore. We're done RSVPing to this party. Now we're just showing up and crashing. And now Damascus, the Syrian capital, has also come under attack, or at least the outskirts of Damascus have come under attack, and Israel's basically saying, hey, we're going to strike near your capital. We don't even care if it's that close to your capital, because again, you're not doing anything to get rid of Hezbollah in the region. And something that most people aren't talking about is after the October 7th, 2023 attacks, Israel knew that there is potential for these groups, these terrorist groups, to be operating in Syria and then come in and create more attacks and more mayhem inside of Israel. So again, instead of sitting back and watching this happen, Israel's like, hey, we're going to make this happen. We're going to create a good offense instead of just standing back and playing defense. We're going to Tom Brady this, because at the end of the day, Syria, you're not doing anything to help us. And to highlight that, on October 12th, 2023, Israel rolled in and started destroying airfields in Syria that could potentially be used by these rebel groups. And then on January 20th, 2024, these airstrikes kind of came to a head when Israel targeted the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, who were said to be supporting factions in Syria that could be operating against Israel. So at this point, Israel's like, hey, nothing's off the table. Even Iranian targets that might be supporting bad factions towards Israel in Syria. And then on February 6, 2024, the Shuyut air base was attacked by Israel because they said Hezbollah fighters were being trained there and operating out of there. So again, just another statement of Israel saying, hey, Hezbollah, we're not going to tolerate you anymore. And again, you can kind of note throughout this video, the theme is that Iran is Hezbollah's lifeline. So the lines between Syria, Iran, and Hezbollah, potentially even Hamas, are kind of being blurred, and Israel's seeing the writing on the wall. Iran's kind of the lifeline to all these groups. Iran, Tehran, however you want to say it, they're supporting these groups. So Israel's saying, hey, we're going to target the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps of Iran who's supporting any of these groups, and nothing's off the table. So this is kind of turning into a pressure cooker where things could continue to escalate even further. And then let's not even forget the bear in the room. That's Russia, who's also operating within that region. And Russia is supporting the Assad regime in Syria, which isn't really doing anything about Hezbollah necessarily. And Russia's goals militarily are kind of obvious. They essentially want to control the flow of resources in as many places as they possibly can. Now, I'm not saying that's not the goal of pretty much every military in the entire world, but Israel's a formidable balancing force to Russia. Russia doesn't want to go up against Israel's F-16s, F-35Is, or missile defense systems. So Israel is kind of balancing out that in the Syrian theater as well. But the basic facts is this is a high-octane wrestle for control over the region, and who's going to emerge victorious is still on the table. I mean, at the end of the day, Israel is going to continue to target these factions that could create another October 7th, 2023 event. And there's just no changing that. So I'll keep you updated as this situation evolves. Thank you for checking out this video. If you enjoyed it, hey, why not say hello to me on another one of these videos? That's essentially the best compliment you can give me, because the YouTube algorithm is like, oh, you want to watch another one of his videos. He must be a really interesting fighter pilot who likes to hear himself talk on YouTube. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you in the next video. Most of all, have a great day.